I was interviewing with UBS, and this was a phone interview that I had with a UBS banker, and it turned out that the UBS banker was a big Manchester United fan as well, and I have Manchester United listed on my resume, and it was a 35 minute phone call that I had, and trust me, about 20 minutes out of the 30 or 35 minutes that we spent speaking over the phone was spent talking about Manchester United. What's up guys? Kaise hai aap log? Good to see all of you. Good to see all of your beautiful faces. Hopefully you are enjoying seeing my beautiful face as well. देखिए आज के वीडियो में I'll be talking about the resume, and I'll be covering every single aspect of the resume that got me into Goldman Sachs. If you've been following my channel so far, if you've seen some of the recent videos that I've done on my channel, you probably know my story, but for you guys who are unaware, let me reiterate. So I graduated from the Georgia Institute of Technology with a degree in industrial engineering in December 2015. After I graduated, I worked at Goldman Sachs, did a 1-month internship with Goldman on their trading floor, which was followed by a stint with Deutsche Bank on a full-time basis. So I worked at Deutsche for about 2 months, and then after the 2 months that I spent at Deutsche, I moved over to Goldman, moved back to Goldman, but this time on a full-time basis. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the resume and covering every single aspect of that resume that got me into Goldman Sachs on a full-time basis. Some of you might be feeling कि यार देखो मेरे पास कुछ भी relevant work experience है नहीं, work experience है, but it's not in any way related to finance or investment banking. देखिए, I will be using personal examples of mine in this video to tell you that even if you do not have any relevant work experience, you can still make whatever work experience that you have seem more relevant than it actually is using some smart strategies. So regardless of whether you're still in college or you already have some years of full-time work experience under your belt, you will find this video extremely useful. And whatever I'm talking about in this video has been explained comprehensively, leaving absolutely no stone unturned in my ebook as well. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have checked it out already. Some of you have purchased the ebook as well. If you haven't yet checked it out, you can see the link above. You'll see that the responses, the feedback from some of the initial buyers has been overwhelmingly positive. सबसे पहले मैं आप लोग से पूछूंगा, why is it important to have a good resume? Let me point out that most of the people who are applying for these competitive investment banking roles, ultra competitive is the phrase that I should use. A lot of them already have a solid background in terms of their academic achievements, the academic credentials, as well as, stuff that they've done on the college campuses in terms of extracurricular activities, as well as co-curricular activities. So you're competing with some of the best in the business. Now, it's not enough for you to just have these strong academic credentials as well as extracurricular credentials, only because, as I said, so many others have it as well, right? It's how you present these leadership skills of yours, these extracurricular achievements, these academic achievements of yours on a single piece of paper that will actually help you stand out amongst the thousands of other applicants who are applying to these big companies who have equally impressive credentials as you do. So before we jump into the individual sections of the resume, जो हम लोग one by one tackle करेंगे, let me just provide a couple of broad and general pointers to you guys. तो सबसे पहले, the resume should be 1 page in length. देखो, if you're a software developer, if you're a coder, maybe you can have 2 pages. मुझे ज़्यादा experience नहीं है because I wasn't a coder, I wasn't a software developer, but I believe कि कोई software developers 2 page का भी resume करते हैं only because they've had so many projects that they've actually worked on. So please verify that from some other source. But if you're not applying for a software developer position, but if you're applying for a front office position, then please make sure that your resume is limited to 1 page. You could have 2 pages if you want to, but it just shows that you're including trivial pieces of information as opposed to focusing on just the vital few pieces of information. देखो, Steve Jobs का भी resume 1 ही page का था. So if he had a 1-page resume, I think you ought to have a 1-page resume as well, unless you've done something remarkable, groundbreaking, something that's changed the fucking world. And if that were the case, you probably would not have been applying to Goldman Sachs. तुम अपना ही काम कर रहे होते. Secondly, use as many numbers as possible in your resume because it adds so much fucking credibility to your resume. It shows that he or she is talking about specifics as opposed to just being a bit vague and beating around the bush and just being nebulous. Numbers के साथ you can actually talk about the results in terms of the revenue increase, in terms of the cost reduction that your efforts brought about in the company. And you can use numbers for other purposes also. I'll actually talk about how you can actually fabricate a few numbers. This is meant to be off the record, so aak maar raho, but listen on until the very end of the video because I'll be talking about that later. Thirdly, your resume should be devoid of typos and have consistent formatting all across the board. The worst thing that can happen is you have a strong set of extracurricular activities, you have strong academic credentials, but because of certain typos, because of you having overlooked certain errors in terms of formatting on your resume, the person who's actually reading through your resume is like, you know what, this guy doesn't take his or her attention to detail very seriously, so fuck it, let me just throw his or her resume in the rejection pile. Please अपना resume 10, 20, 30, 40 बार अच्छे से पढ़ लेना. Time now to get into the individual sections of the resume. Education section में सबसे important चीज़ है GPA, right? You should have a high GPA, ideally above a 3.5 or a 3.6 out of a 4.0. I had a pretty high GPA, as you can see, 3.86, graduated with highest honors. I wasn't the smartest kid in college, but I had a very strong work ethic, and that's typically what a high GPA demonstrates or signifies. It shows that you have a strong work ethic, and bankers will rather hire someone who has a strong work ethic and a willingness to learn, as opposed to hiring someone who's a genius but is a lazy genius. So make sure you keep your GPA high. If you started off with a somewhat low GPA in college, then definitely work hard during the remaining semesters that you have left in college, such that you can actually increase your grade point average as you take on more classes, as more and more semesters go by. The other thing that I ought to mention is that if you're a non-finance major, but if you've taken a few finance classes in college, these could be free electives, extra classes that you've taken, or if you've completed any relevant certified online courses or training related to finance. So this could be anything on financial modeling, financial valuation, anything on financial securities, or anything that falls within the realm of finance. Then you could perhaps include a line or two under the education section of your resume, listing out the courses or the classes that you've taken. So that was pretty much it for the education section. Now coming to the professional experience section of the resume. So this is the section where you talk about any relevant work experience or irrelevant work experience that you've had, that you want to highlight, that you want to expand upon. These could be internships that you've done while in college. These could be any full-time work stints that you've had after having graduated college. Now, if I actually scan through my professional experience section on this resume of mine, I probably would have added more numbers in hindsight. Abhi dekho to koi bhi numbers nahi hai. I only see like a 600 plus under Deutsche Bank Securities, which is the third experience that's listed out in this section. So I definitely would have added more numbers. Now, I had briefly alluded to the fact that you can actually fabricate numbers, but look, it's a slightly risky strategy. So if you're fabricating numbers, what I would say is make it seem plausible. ऐसे नहीं लगना चाहिए कि this number makes absolutely no fucking sense. It shouldn't be an outrageous fucking number. And the other thing that I would say is have a defense ready as well. So in the event that someone asks you, okay, how did you arrive at this number? Make sure that you can actually walk the other person through how you arrived at that number, even if it's just like a back of the envelope calculation. I don't quite have Cisco listed under professional experience on this resume, but in an older version of my resume, this was I think when I was still in college, my third year or my second year, I had Cisco as well. And in my Cisco experience ka description, I still remember I had something like I worked on a project that helped save the company $962,000 in that quarter. ऐसे कुछ था, some freakish fucking number, but I know that I had done some sort of back of the envelope calculation to arrive at that number. Now the actual number may have been completely different from the 962k that I had listed on that resume, but I did know that if someone does ask me कि Anubhav, how did you arrive at this 962k number, I had some sort of back of the envelope calculation in my mind to be able to explain it to that person. The one thing that I see in a lot of resumes is that a lot of people use phrases such as responsible for when describing their work experiences, responsible for, or worked on, or assigned this task. Now look, don't tell me what you were fucking responsible for doing. Tell me what you actually did. How do I know if you actually did what you were assigned to do? How do I know if you actually did what you were responsible for doing? So don't use phrases such as responsible for, worked on, assigned. Instead, use words and phrases such as built, accomplished, delivered, developed. I've used starter words such as create, compiled and analyzed, built, consolidated, performed, ranked, developed, created, right? So you can clearly see that it shows that I've done all of this, right? As opposed to telling the other person, this is what I was responsible for doing, but not quite telling the other person if I actually did what I was responsible for doing or not, right? The next point that I want to touch upon is that you can actually make certain work experiences that you've had in the past, be it internships or full-time experiences that aren't quite related to investment banking or to finance, seem a lot more relevant than they might actually be. And a couple of ways in which you can actually go about doing this. Number one, when you are writing the descriptions of your work experiences, right, try to tailor those descriptions in accordance with what the roles and responsibilities of an investment banker are. So what I mean by this is, what you should be doing is, you should read up the roles and responsibilities of an investment banker, right? You know some of the tasks that you had carried out in some previous work experience of yours, right? Now what you could do is, try finding connections between the two. Even if they're very vague connections, stress on those points that have some similarities as opposed to stressing on the points that have absolutely no similarities, right? Simple ways in which you can actually make them seem somewhat correlated. Number one, if you worked on PowerPoint in some internship of yours, right? Then mention that, stress on that, because investment bankers spend a lot of time, especially first year bankers, pretty much spend all fucking day in PowerPoint, right? Number two, if you've done any sort of modeling or data analysis or financial analysis in Excel in some previous work experience of yours, then definitely mention that, stress on that, because bankers also do a lot of financial modeling, right? Now the data analysis and the financial analysis and the financial modeling that you did at some previous work experience, right, may not be similar or may not be exactly the same as the financial modeling that you'll be doing in investment banking, right? But at the same time, right, it's still data analysis, it's still financial modeling, it's still something you did in Excel. तो कोई ना कोई तो similarities है, right? It's not completely or vastly different. Then the other thing is, if you had any sort of client interaction in some previous role of yours, then mention that. Of course, in an investment banking role, it's a relationship business, right? You're talking to clients, you're liaising with clients. You might not be doing that during your first year, your second year, but slowly but surely, as you become a more senior banker, you start liaising, you start interacting with clients a lot more. So if you've had any sort of FaceTime or interaction with clients in a previous work experience of yours, definitely highlight that. Even though those clients might not be the same clients as you encounter in investment banking, they might not be the CEOs and the CFOs and the CXOs of Fortune 500 companies, right? Still mention the fact that you had FaceTime and interactions with clients, because as I said, it will make it seem a lot more relevant to investment banking than it actually might be. So PowerPoint, financial or data modeling in Excel, then FaceTime with clients, brilliant ways for you to make your work experiences seem a lot more relevant and related. I'll give you a simple example of how I had used a very clever bit of wordplay to make a particular experience of mine that's on my resume seem a lot more relevant than it actually was. Now, if you take a look at how I've described myself and the title that I have listed under the PwC work experience, I call myself a banking and capital markets intern, and in brackets I have financial services. Now, my official title during that internship was a technology intern. It was not banking and capital markets intern, but I was a technology intern who was assigned to the financial services industry. So technically speaking, I wasn't quite wrong in calling myself a financial services intern or a banking and capital markets intern. Banking and capital markets being the sub-industry within the financial services industry that I was assigned to. So you see how a clever bit of wordplay, not calling myself a technology consultant, right, which would make my work experience not seem as relevant, relatively speaking, but instead calling myself a banking and capital markets intern and having that key phrase, financial services, in parentheses or in brackets, definitely makes my work experience seem a lot more relevant than it actually was. So you can also use some smart wordplay, some smart strategies in the way you phrase these descriptions, these titles, to your advantage. Another thing that you should definitely consider doing is using certain words in the descriptions of your professional experiences that bankers fucking love, that bankers fucking gist to. And some of these words include leveraged, IRR, modeled, returns, deals, there are many others, but think of words that you come across in banking parlance, words that bankers love to use, words that you come across fairly frequently within the domain of investment banking, right? Only incorporate them if you can do so in a smooth manner. You don't necessarily have to force the issue. So leveraged, IRR, modeled, returns, deals. When you're talking about deals, right? Certain deals that you may have worked on in a previous work experience of yours, these may not necessarily have to be the big ticket deals that investment bankers typically work on, right? But even if it's like a very small deal that you worked on, it's still a deal nonetheless. And when a banker sees that word deal, right, he may not necessarily question, what was the value, what was the size of that deal. He'll see that, he or she has some deal making experience. Now moving on to the next section, which is the leadership and projects. Now before I actually get into the meat of this section, let me just mention to you that I was using this resume when I had just graduated from college. So I got into Goldman Sachs full time 6 months after having graduated from college, which is why the leadership and projects that you see on this resume are still related to my time in college. But I'm guessing if it's been quite some time since you graduated college, you will probably not have any college-related extracurricular and co-curricular activities on your resume. You probably already know this, but I think it's worth reiterating that banks love fucking hiring all-rounders. They just absolutely love them. So, someone who's like very good academically and someone who's pretty involved on campus as well in strong leadership positions. So it's imperative that you're actually involved on campus and involved not just as a member, because membership fee to koi bhi bhar deta hai, right? Anyone can be like, oh, let me just pay the membership dues and I can become a member in the organization. But you should actually be gunning for leadership roles within that organization. In my opinion, 1 or 2 very, very strong leadership positions or leadership roles trumps 5 or 6 ordinary roles in different organizations. So think about the 1 or 2 organizations that you're very passionate about, that you're very interested in while you're in college. Join those organizations and then try rising through the ranks, try gunning for the topmost positions, president, vice president, treasurer, board level positions within those organizations. बहुत सारे लोग थे कॉलेज में, बहुत सारे चूतिए थे कॉलेज में जो बोलते थे, I'm involved in this and this and this and this and this and this and this, but at the same time they were simply involved as members. उनकी जो involvement थी was at a very superficial level. They were not involved as leaders within those organizations, because you cannot possibly hold leadership positions in 5 or 6 different organizations. Then you aren't quite doing your job as a leader in all of those organizations in the best manner possible. You're just half-assing your roles. Definitely join the finance society of your campus. So the finance society of my campus was called the Georgia Tech Student Foundation Investments Committee. It was the largest student-run philanthropic endowment fund in the nation, in the United States. At that time, the value was 1.2 million. I think currently the value is close to 1.5 million, but anyway, that's besides the point. I had joined as an analyst during my first semester in the committee. I fucking killed it during my first semester, did really well, got promoted to head of one of the sectors. So I got promoted to head of the energy and the utility sector during my second semester in the committee, and then during my final semester in the committee, which was my third semester in the committee, I got promoted to one of the co-heads of the committee, or the senior financial director of the committee. And the investments committee or the finance society of my college campus did absolutely wonders for me because of a couple of different reasons. Number one, it solidified my practical understanding of the world of finance, because we were actually dealing with real securities. We were actually investing in real securities. We had an actual portfolio value of 1.2 million. This wasn't just fucking fake money. This was actual money. The other thing is, I found lots of mentors come friends within that committee, especially when I was coming in as a junior person during my first semester, during my second semester in the committee. There were lots of fourth years, right, who were in that committee, who were already in executive level positions, some of whom had already secured full-time roles for themselves at some of the best investment banks all across the world. They became my mentors within the committee, right? I developed a strong relationship with them, right? I treated them as mentors, come friends, and they guided me a lot. Plus, because of how rapidly I rose through the ranks from analyst to sector head to head of the committee, all in the space of 3 semesters, it made for a great tell me about yourself story as well. And so when I would relate my progression in the IC to recruiters, they would find my journey very impressive. So had it not been for the IC, I probably would not have landed any of the roles that I subsequently did land up. The other thing that you'll notice in the leadership and the project section of my resume is that I've used lots of numbers. I've pretty much used at least one number, if not multiple numbers, in every single bullet that you see listed under the Student Foundation Investments Committee, as well as under Racetrack Petroleum Senior Design Project. So you see how pleasing to the eye it looks when you see lots of numbers. It seems as if, you know what, yes, this person means business. This person is being specific, is not being vague, is not being nebulous. Now moving on to the additional information section of my resume. As you can see on my resume, I have technical training / skills listed, and I also have a line where I list out out my interests. Now, not too much to talk about in this section, but the one thing that I will mention, especially when it comes to talking about the skills and the strengths that you have, a lot of people I've seen mention stuff like I'm a team player, I have leadership skills, I have communication skills, I have Microsoft Office, Excel, PowerPoint. Look, you could list them, right? There's no harm in listing them, but it's something that every fucking Tom, Dick, Harry, average Joe lists out. Every single person. So by listing vague skills and strengths like leadership, communication, Microsoft Office, Excel, PowerPoint, team player, it doesn't make you stand out in any way, क्योंकि सब ही डालते हैं. So even if you actually have them, right, no reader will actually take it seriously. Now if you take a look at the technical training and the skills that I have listed, right, I have Python, MATLAB, R, SQL, VBA, GMP, Minitab, Bloomberg Terminal. These are more unique, these are more nuanced, right? Not everyone has these skills, right? So they don't sound as commonplace as communication skills, leadership skills, Microsoft Office, जो बहुत ही vague है, जो सब लोग ही भैंचो डालते हैं. And last but most definitely not the least, let me talk about the interest section under additional information. Now I know it appears at the very bottom of the resume. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि उसकी importance बहुत कम है. In fact, according to me, I feel the interest section is actually one of the more important sections of the resume, even if it doesn't appear that way. Now, one of the reasons I mention that is because the interest section is the space that you can use to actually showcase to the other person, to showcase to the interviewer or the recruiter, right, or the banker that you're speaking with, that you are a multifaceted person, that you aren't just a nerd, someone who's just buried in books on investment banking and books on finance, but you have a good personality, you have other sides to your personality as well. You have interests outside of finance, interests outside of investment banking, and that you're a multifaceted person. Think about it this way, right? जब कोई तुमको interview कर रहा है, when a recruiter is sitting down, right, in the interview room and interviewing you, he or she is trying to assess if he or she will be able to spend 14 to 16 hours with you on a daily basis, because that's pretty much what banking life is, right? You're stuck in the office, you're working 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, right? And if the person thinks that, you know what, this guy's a smart person, right? I know that, this guy's going to be able to build the best of financial models, he or she gets his or her finance, right? But at the same time, iski personality yaar achhi nahi hai, thodi dheeli hai, thodi dull hai, doesn't come across as the most interesting person. I honestly will not really enjoy spending 14-hour days, 15-hour days, 16-hour days with this person. And so I'll pass on this person, I'll look at the next candidate. So that's what's very important for you to come across as a multi-dimensional person, as a multifaceted person. So definitely utilize this intersection that you have, right? Could be one line, could be two lines, to showcase some of your primary interests. Because who knows, you might just come across a banker who has a similar interest, and maybe the majority of the interview is spent talking about that common interest that you have, which is exactly what happened to me. So I'll give you a quick story. So I was interviewing with UBS, and this was a phone interview that I had with a UBS banker, and it turned out that UBS banker was a big Manchester United fan as well, and I have Manchester United listed on my resume. And it was a 30-35 minute phone call that I had, and trust me, about 20 minutes out of the 30 or 35 minutes that we spent speaking over the phone was spent talking about Manchester United. और मुझे कुछ करना ही नहीं था. I did not feel like a fucking interview. And so he understood that, this guy seems like a cool person. He's got an interesting personality. He's got varied interests, as opposed to just being like a one-track or a unidimensional sort of person. And needless to say, I did make it through to the next round of interviews with UBS. So it's very important for you to highlight, what are some of the other things that you like doing when you're not spending time studying, when you're not spending time learning about finance. So I have Manchester United, golf, Reddit, macroeconomics, pro bono consulting, but you could list anything. Could be reading books, could be podcasts, could be fitness, list out anything. So that's all I had. जैसे मैंने आपको वीडियो की शुरुआत में कहा था, this video will entail a deep dive into every single section of the resume that got me into Goldman Sachs. So hopefully I did deliver on my promise. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you took a lot away from it. That's exactly what my goal was. अगर आपके कोई भी questions है related to the resume that I talked about, related to your resume, related to investment banking in general, finance in general, or any personal question that you may have, then please post that question of yours in the comment section. I take a look at every single question that comes my way individually, and I reply to each of them individually, and I heart them, and I like them, and I give them a thumbs up. So please अपने questions post करिए. Also, let me remind you, please do check out my ebook if you haven't done so. Look through the sales page comprehensively, पढ़िए. just so that you can understand what the ebook entails. I talked about my resume in detail. I talked about general tips and best practices and tricks to embellish your resume in detail. But इससे भी ज़्यादा detail मैं अपने ebook में provide करता हूँ, along with detailed information on a lot many other topics. So please check out my ebook. Link description में है. And this is the discount link. So please grab your discounted copy before the discount period ends. So thank you so much for having watched this video. I look forward to all your comments, your likes, your shares, and I look forward to you checking out the ebook as well. Until next time, stay safe. Have a good night. Cheers.